You awake before the sun, wrapped in the heavy quiet of a city not yet stirred. The air still clings to the night's chill, and the faint scent of olive oil and wet stone lingers from yesterday's street washings. You are not a senator, nor a priest, nor a merchant counting coins by lamplight. You tug on your simple tunic, secure the modest satchel to your belt, and nod to the baker setting his oven aglow. The streets are nearly empty, save for a few dogs nosing at scraps, and the clatter of a lone cart headed toward the forum. You are something far less remembered than letter runner, a cursor, one of the many invisible gears in the massive machine of Rome's communication network. He lives in the eastern quarter, where mosaics line the entryways, and the air smells faintly of crushed laurel leaves. Pompeii, the bustling provincial town you call home, lies not on the grand highways of the empire. You hand it to his steward, who doesn't thank you, just grunts. One is a list of theater repairs from the city magistrate to the marble workers. Another contains an awkward love poem from a wine merchant's son to a senator's daughter. You don't read the letters, of course, at least not often. A butcher's assistant hands you a slice of boiled pork and an unofficial tip for running letters between him and his supplier. You chew it slowly as you walk. It's tough, but filling, like the low hum of bees, or the smell of sour wine on warm days. You've never really thought much about it. It last rumbled years ago, before you were born. Occasionally, someone mentions it, usually old women on market days, muttering about the gods. But it's just a mountain, big, dark, and silent. But you've come to recognize the weight of secrets, even without opening them. So is Rome. You've been offered more permanent work before, but it always comes with strings. You prefer the freedom of walking, of not belonging entirely to anyone. And yet, my letters still arrive later than yours. Come back tomorrow. I have one going out to her. Tell me, why don't I just hire you to handle everything? You already turning to go when you hear Gaius' raspy voice behind the stone doorway. The letter is to a minor priest, requesting a ceremonial blessing for an upcoming marriage. Even if they didn't know it, you sit for a while at the edge of the forum, near the statue of Eumacia, watching its shadows grow longer and merchants pack their wares. You wonder how many of your deliveries today have been for celebrations, and how many for problems. It's often hard to tell. She pays well, and always offers you a cup of watered wine when you arrive. One shouts something about a lost denarius, and another pushes him into a basin of water. The city hums, softly vendors shouting prices, iron being hammered, women bartering for dyed fabric in the shade of a silk stall. You remember playing that game once, years ago, before you started walking the city for a living. That's centuries from now. Someone might uncover a wax tablet with your dust on it, and wonder what errands you were running on this quiet, blue-ski day, before you knew the names of every alley and shortcut between the brothels and the baths. The graffiti changes daily. Yesterday, someone had drawn a pig in a toga. You smile, faintly. Even in Pompeii, humor survives bureaucracy. But along the lesser veins, smaller roads, dusty footpaths, side alleys, behind villas, still, messages must move. Orders, gossip, grain contracts, and birthday invitations all find their way into wax-sealed scrolls. And it's your feet that carry them. They always ache around this time. You stretch one leg, rolling your ankle carefully, and glance at the sky, clear blue. No sign of the mountain. Not from here. But you know it's there. Always looming. Not because you are fast, though you are, but because you are dependable, unremarkable, and always on time. Today begins like any other. Your first delivery is to the house of Gaius Cornelius, a retired soldier turned landowner, known for his precise temper. Everyone's goods are delayed, but it isn't your place to comment. You're just the messenger. His message, a shipping notice from Naples. A crate of olive oil was delayed again. Tell them, if it's not here by Saturn's day, I'll send my men to fetch it. You nod, though it won't change anything. The oil is delayed because the harbor is choked with late arrivals. You head next toward the forum, passing a wall where a boy scribbles something in charcoal, something crude, no doubt. Your route today takes you across 3 districts. You carry 7 letters, each wrapped in cloth, or tucked into a wax-sealed wooden tablet. Near the temple of Apollo, you pause to watch a group of boys playing knucklebones. The sun has risen now, warming the tiles under your sandals. You drop off your fourth message at a shop near the meat market. At midday, you find yourself near the amphitheater, sitting on a crumbling stone wall to rest your feet. Vesuvius is part of the background of your life. You stand up again, brushing off your knees. Still 3 deliveries left. The 6th letter is addressed to a bathhouse owner, a sharp-tongued widow who runs the Balneum Felix, with more order than most men run their households. You're sweating, she says today, peering at your face as you hand her the tablet. It's warm. You reply simply, Pompeii is always warm. She shrugs. You smile non-committally. Lucilla sips her wine. You nod, already calculating how early you'll need to leave to get there by midday. It'll be a long walk. Your final stop is at a villa near the edge of the city, just past the necropolis. The air smells of dry earth and lavender. By the time you return to the center of town, your satchel is empty and your feet are sore. Someone calls your name another letter, perhaps, but you wave them off. You'll walk again tomorrow. As dusk falls, you glance north, toward the faint outline of this. It looks peaceful tonight, unmoving, solid. You've never once imagined that your footsteps, your messages, your errands, these tiny things might be the last remnants someone could ever find of you. But that's the funny thing about history. Sometimes it's the smallest lives that leave the clearest footprints. The next morning, you leave before first light. Lucilla's letter to Herculaneum won't carry itself, and the road north is long, dusty, and peppered with uneven stones. You pack light, just your usual satchel with a bit of bread and a worn water skin. It hugs the hills, passing through vineyards and patches of shade, the bay glittering far off to the left. The air smells sweeter alhelus like amphory and sweat, more like pine and rosemary. The early streets of Pompeii are quiet, but not still. A donkey brays in the distance. A man snores under an awning near the smoke trails lazily from a dozen kitchen chimneys as early risers stir pots of lentils and leftover You know this route well. Past the Sarno Gate, then onto the winding coastal road. Lucilla's letter is sealed in wax, as always, and tightly bound with twine. You enter through the gate, nodding to the guards. You're known here, to a familiar face among unfamiliar names. Her home is tucked just behind a fish stall that reeks of brine and sun. You hand over the letter, and she does, uneven open it immediately, sets it on a table and offers you a cup of something cool and sweet Molsum. Whether they picture your dust-caked sandals or the tightness in your calves as you climb the last hill before town. Probably not. Most people only think about their letters when they're late. You don't read it though if pressed. You could probably guess its contents. A business proposition. Maybe a payment dispute. No wings fluttering from tree to tree. Just the persistent hum of insects. It makes you pause. You've taken this route dozens, no, hundreds of times, and the birds have never been so quiet. Or a request to rent bathing space to some merchant's cousin. His son, barely 10, runs barefoot across the stones, chasing a carved wooden hoop. You smile and lift your hand in greeting. Antonia tells you that the theater in town has been closed for repairs, and that there is talk of a minor quake in the north. You nod, filing it away. People talk about tremors often in this part of the empire. Small ones are common. Most forget by the next day. A kind of poetry. The driver waves lazily. He's chewing something of fennel stem. Maybe not sharp, not violent, more like the groan of a door closing far away. No one around you reacts, so you don't either. You walk mostly in silence, with only the sound of your own footsteps and the occasional rustle of a lizard darting through dry grass. Pompeii beckons hazy in the distance, its roofs a reddish shimmer under the sun. I suppose that's the closest thing to an answer I'll get. She tosses you a coin more than usual for speed. Nature has its moods. No messages to carry, no deliveries to make. Would the city feel different without its invisible threads, that rumble. They laugh, they argue, and they plan for tomorrow's tasks. But high above, Vesuvius is stirring. The silence on the road, the birds, the gods have their rhythms. You keep walking. Fitting. You drop a chipped coin at the base, more out of habit than belief. You used to travel in pairs when you first started, but now you prefer the solitude. The day settles around you like dust. You count your steps out of habit. Just over 30,000 today. You nod and keep walking, knowing you'll reach the city before he does, even on foot. Not just the usual Pompeian warmth, but something else, a thickness. You feel it in your chest as you pass the fountains, as you nod to the fruit seller. Near the Temple of Isis, you wonder sometimes whether the recipients ever think of you, the person who walked half a day with their words bouncing against their hip. About halfway to Herculaneum, you pass a pair of oxen, pulling a slow-moving cart. It's a warm day. The sun rises behind you, casting long shadows ahead. You reach a small way station just before Nuna, crumbling roadside shrine to Mercury, god of travelers and messages. A few more miles, and the walls of Herculaneum come into view, less imposing than Rome. Certainly, but still solid, still bustling. Lucella's contact turns out to be a lean, older woman named Antonia. "You're early," she says. "I left early," you reply. She laughs softly. "Smart. You rest there for a little while, enough to let your legs recover. After a time, you thank her and start the walk back. As you return along the winding road, you notice how still the birds are. No calls from the hills, but you shrug it off. Back inside the city gates, the air is heavy and oddly warm. The Tublik maker on Vicolo Diumachia waves to you from his stool, scratching away at another wax sheet with his stylus. You pause at a familiar wall one that changes daily with new graffiti. Today it reads, "I was here. So were you. Now we're both gone." You stop longer than usual, reading it twice. It's probably just a work of a bored apprentice, but there's something about the words. Then you hear a faint rumble, a low sound. Pompeii has always groaned and shifted. The earth here isn't silent. Later that evening, Lucilla's waiting outside the bathhouse. "Well," she asks, arms crossed. "Did she agree?" "She didn't say," you reply, but she smiled. Lucilla snorts. You thank her, but something's still pressing in your chest. Back in your room small, barely more than a storage alcove behind a linen shop, you wash your feet and stretch out on the cot. Your satchel rests at your feet, empty again. And for a brief moment, you wonder what would happen if tomorrow no one needed a letter. You drift asleep with that question. Elsewhere in the city, in villas and alleys, in bathhouses and bakeries, people are finishing their own days. The birds still haven't returned. The ground holds its breath. And you, will wake at dawn to lace your sandals again, aware that you are running messages through the final hours of a city's life. You wake to a strange silence. Not the usual calm of early morning, but a muffled, heavy. It presses against your ears like wet cloth. You sit up slowly, rubbing your face, expecting to hear the bustle of carts or the distant calls of vendors. But there's nothing. Just the soft creak of your own floorboards and the faint rattle of something outsideless shudders. Maybe the sky is gray, not the soft morning haze, but a gray that feels close, as if the clouds have dropped to the rooftops and decided not to leave. You lace your sandals. The satchel waits at your feet, and your first instinct is to check the day's deliveries. For messages, the mountain is no longer just a shape on the horizon, it's breathing. A thick column of smoke rises from its peak, curling upward into the heavy sky. It looks unnatural, alive. One to a wool merchant near the Stabian Baths, one to a schoolmaster, one to a stonemason at the city's edge. Your grandfather once spoke of a black rain that fell when he was young, and how the goats wouldn't feed for days afterward. But he had been far from here, near Nola, and you'd assumed it was just an old man's tale. His eyes are fixed upward, toward the plume in the sky, and one a rare one to a woman named Livia, who lives alone in the shadow of the amphitheater. A few people stand outside, staring at the mountain with narrowed eyes, murmuring to each other. No one is panicking. Not yet. Pompeii has lived in the mountain's shadow for centuries. People trust stone. They trust gods. You step out into the street and notice the dust, but even as you form the thought, a faint tremor runs through the stone under your feet. You don't need to carry letters today. It's small, barely enough to rattle a jug on a shelf, but enough. As you walk, the ash grows thicker. It clings to your arms, gets into your eyes. Your feet scuff through it like dry snow. The tools lie scattered, as if someone left in a hurry. A single column base sits half carved in the courtyard. You hesitate, then tuck the message beneath a stone weight where it won't blow away. Not normal street dust, but a fine gray powder coating the ground and hanging faintly in the air. You touch your fingers to it. Volcanic ash. Somewhere in the back of your mind, a memory stirs. A small place, pressed against the outer curve of the amphitheater wall. You knock gently. No answer. You knock again, louder this time. You look north, but still, you start walking. Your route is quieter than usual. Most doors are shut. You deliver the first message to the wool merchant. He takes it without a word, barely glancing at you. Her eyes are wide, and there's ash on her cheeks. What do you think it means? He asks. I don't know, you say. Has it ever done this before? He shakes his head. Not like that. You rush outside and see it. The cloud is no longer rising. The air fills with the sound of sandals slapping stone, of prayers shouted into chaos. It's rolling, moving. A wall of ash, fire, and stones sliding down the mountain toward the city. A roar that shakes your bones, that seems to come from both above and below. The house trembles. Dust rains from the ceiling. Outside, screams rise, hundreds of voices at once. The schoolmaster is next. You find him in the atrium of his modest home, gathering scrolls and tablets into a leather case. You cough, pulling your tunic up over your mouth. Every breath burns. Every step is a fight. One man pushes a cart filled with loaves of bread. Dogs howl, running in circles. Still working, you ask, handing him the sealed tablet. It's the farthest from the mountain of his chance, if there is one. He doesn't smile. I'm sending my students home. I think the gods are angry. The roar has quieted, replaced by silence. Again this time, darker, heavier. You want to tell him it's probably just smoke, that mountains sometimes breathe. You stumble on the schoolmaster. Hears it too. He nods toward the courtyard. Go home, he says. But you do, because there are still two left. The guards are gone. The road beyond is clogged with carts and animals. Some overturned. It scrapes your legs, but you don't care. A runner with no monument, no record, no statue in the forum. Just a route walked faithfully. A life of letters and tired feet. You're outside now, on the open road. A shoe print near a cracked wall. You press on toward the edge of the city, toward the stonemason's workshop. At the workshop, the mason isn't there. Not a soldier, not a senator, just someone who ran messages in the final days of a dying city. One letter left. If messages mean anything, when the streets they describe no longer exist, below, the city is lost in the cloud. Livia's house is quiet when you arrive. The city was buried homes, temples, graffiti, bakery ovens, all gone beneath a blanket of ash. And Tom delivered, except for the stonemasons. He never received it. The door creaks open, and you step inside. Livia, she appears from the back room, holding a small bundle of fabric. Are you all right? You ask. I heard something, she says. A noise like thunder, but there were no clouds. You hand her the letter. From your sister, I think. You came in yesterday. She takes it with both hands, as if it might shatter. Then the sky cracks open. The sound is like nothing you've ever heard. You and Livia both freeze. Then the light changes. A reddish darkness floods through the door like sunset. But wrong. People run. Children cry. You turn to Livia. We have to go. Now. The streets are madness. People stumble blindly through ash. Others carry statues or bundles of valuables. You grab Livia's hand and pull her through the crowd, heading for the southern gate. Ash falls like snow now. The sky is nearly black. Somewhere behind you, buildings collapse. You don't look back. You pass the forum. Statues are crumbling. Columns lie, cracked and broken. The temple doors are open. The priest's gone. At the gate, the crowd surges. People push, scream, beg. You pull Livia through a gap in the wall of place where the stone has broken away. And you run. Hours later, you collapse near a hill overlooking the bay. The ash still falls. But thinner now, you and Livia sit together, breathing in ragged gasps. You look at your satchel, torn and empty. All the letters are gone. And yet, part of you wonders if it matters anymore. You never returned upon. In the days that followed, the mountain continued to breathe fire. But your footprints remain, somewhere under that dust. And centuries later, someone will find them. A wooden tablet. A half-delivered message. They'll wonder who carried it, where it was going, why it was never opened, and they'll never know your name. But they'll know this. Someone once walked these streets. The rooster crows long before the sun rises, though you are already awake. The thatched roof above your head does little to hold in the warmth of the dying heart, and the wool blanket covering you is rough and scratchy. Despite being scrubbed just 3 days ago, you rub your face, still sore from sleep, and know exactly what day it is. It is a full-body endeavor, a laborious ritual that will occupy the better part of your day, if not longer, and it begins, as it always does, with collecting water. Laundry day. You grab your bucket, worn smooth by years of use, and step outside into the still blue morning. A light frost coats the grass. Your breath clouds in front of you. There is a smell of damp moss and smoke in the air. Someone else has already lit their fire. You dip your bucket in and let the weight of the water sink it. Your arms strain as you haul it back out, sloshing and heavy. It takes 3 more trips to fill what you need. You groan. It's called lye water, and it stings if it gets in your eyes. But it cuts through grease better than anything else. And that's what matters when you're working with sweat-stiff tunics and soot-stained aprons. Still better than it will be by noon. You pour the water in slowly, adding the lye, stirring it with a stick until it turns cloudy. Then you begin, not out loud, of course. You don't have those today. Just lie and be patient. Worn linen, thin in places, with fraying cuffs and armpits that have seen too many summers. You push them down with both hands, squeezing and kneading like dough. Your fingers go numb from the cold. You rub a cloth against a cloth, using friction to scrub out dirt. You flip, twist, rinse, repeat. There's no point. Soap is expensive, and your family rarely affords it. Instead, you use something far more humble wood ash. The sky is dull now, sun hidden behind a veil of clouds. Agnes is still there, soaking a wool shawl. But she's also the one who got lice last winter. So maybe fancy doesn't always mean clean. Your forearms are raw. You move on to the heavier garments wool. Over tunics. A child's cloak stained with berry juice. A pair of socks stiffed with dried mud. Shared suffering is the closest thing to joy on laundry day. Each one demands its battle, but the feeling is real. You pin the garments with wooden pegs carved from spare kindling. The wind snaps them like flags. The linen flaps wildly. A tunic sleeve slaps you in the face, and you mutter a word you shouldn't. This is why you only wash clothes every 8 or 9 days. You rub your hands with a bit of leftover grease to soothe the cracks, then sit by the fire with your legs outstretched. Your body hums with exhaustion, not the painful kind, but the kind that settles deep and slow. You bring them inside anyway, folding them slowly, stacking them into rough piles on the wooden bench. The labor is too great. The toll is steep. No one enjoys laundry day in your village. It is not a task of leisure or even a simple household chore. Longer if the clouds return. Whether they'll remember these buckets and cracked hands, These little battles fought with boiled water and ash. And how many generations have passed that knowledge down? Without ever writing it down, the stream lies nearly half a mile down the dirt path, past the barley field and the goose yard, just before the woods begin. You're not the first to the stream. 3 other women are already there, sleeves rolled, buckets full, and hands red from cold. One of them, Agnes, nods at you without looking up. She's busy stirring something in a clay bowl-eye, probably. Water's moving slow this morning, she says. You set your bucket down beside hers. The stream is narrow here, but steady, cold year-round, even in summer. Then comes a walk back slow. Careful, balancing the slopping buckets with aching fingers. It's all just the beginning. Back at your cottage, you set the water beside the fire pit and begin preparing the wash. There is no soap, a scoop of white ash from last night's fire, carefully sifted and mixed with hot water, creates your cleaning solution. The washing basin is a shallow wooden tub, patched in 3 places. The shirts go in first. It's not glamorous, it's not fast, but it works. Mostly, by mid-morning, steam rises from the pot of rinse water boiling over the hearth, and your back aches from bending. Occasionally, someone might add herbs or flowers to the water lavender, if they're lucky, or mint. Outside, the wind has picked up. It's time to hang the clothes to dry. The drying yard is just a patch of ground behind the cottage, strung with twine between 2 old posts. It will take hours to dry. You look down at your hands, red cracked and slightly burned from the lye. You flex them slowly. You think of the baker's daughter, who once claimed her family had a copper basin and perfumed oils from town. Later, you return to the stream not for washing, but to rinse the worst of the soot from your bucket. Sheep dung got into it, she mutters. Again, you both laugh, but it's a tired kind of laughter. Agnes glances up. Do you ever think about the Queen? How do her clothes get washed? You shrugged. Probably someone else's hands. Probably not hers. Agnes grins. Still stinks the same though, doesn't it? You nod. Everything does. Eventually, you walk home in silence. By dusk, the clothes have dried. Mostly, a few damp patches linger in the thicker wool. The room smells cleaner now. Faintly smoky, faintly like ash and wet fabric. Outside, the wind whistles through the eaves. Laundry day is done, but as you stare at the fire, your mind wanders. Who was the first person to invent lye? To realize that something as useless as wood ash could clean clothes. You wonder how people in the future will wash their clothes. Will anyone ever care? Or will it all fade like steam into the sky? The next laundry day doesn't arrive. Alone it brings rain, not a heavy storm. Just a cold, steady drizzle that turns the footpath to the stream into a ribbon of muck. You stand under the low thatch awning, watching droplets streak down from the eaves. There's no waiting it out, rain or shine. The clothes need washing. Your hands are still sore from the last session cracks at the knuckles, nails worn thin. You tuck them into your sleeves for warmth and start down the path, carrying the bucket carefully to keep it from filling with rainwater. It's heavier when soaked. You lower yourself beside it, knees sinking into the soggy ground, and reach for your linen. They smell faintly of smoke, an old sweat. You dunk the first one in the stream, then slap it against the stone with a loud thump. The kind passed down from grandmothers, meant to pace your work. You join in without thinking, letting the rhythm match your movements. You pass the miller's boy kicking rocks into the hedgerow, the mud-caked dog dozing by the bakery's doorway. They're scrubbing children's shirts and socks, chatting quietly. One laughs a clear sound that briefly rises above the splash of water and the whispering rain. And the cooper, who always spits when he sees you though you're not sure why. The village is small enough to know everyone, and close enough to know too much. At the stream, there are more people than usual. You can't imagine paying someone else to do this. The sky never brightens, but your bucket fills slowly with clothes made clean by sheer willpower. And lie. Then again, you can't imagine having coin to spare either. Rain pushes the whole village into rhythm. When the weather's wet, Most avoid the fields, so the women bring their laundry instead. Your dress is soaked from the hem to the thighs. Mud has crept up the backs of your legs. You stretch, your back popping, and begin to walk home with your arms full of heavy, dripping linen. The water's brown with sediment, but no one seems to care. It's passed around carefully, each woman taking just a little to rub into collars and cuffs. The smell is sharp and green. It reminds you of summer, when herbs grow thick and wild beyond the orchard. The children are asleep. The dog snores at the doorway. You pass a tin mug of watered cider between you. Stone benches, a place to hang things out of the rain. It's slow going. The fire is small, and the wool takes hours to stop dripping. The air grows thick with steam and the smell of damp fabric. You nod to the others. Agnes is already kneeling on the flat rocks, with her sleeves rolled high and hair plastered to her forehead. If good sense bought stone, we'd all live in castles, of a place where you don't scrub alone, but with laughter echoing off stone walls and songs that hold the rhythm of centuries. Beside her, Maud, the widow scrubs a sheet so forcefully you fear it might tear in half. A space set aside, protected, for something so constant, something everyone needs. But no one ever thinks to honor. The stains will return. The mud will cling. A crack of late sunlight slips through, and you drag the drying rack just beyond the door, letting the last warmth of the day do what it can. It's a kind of social contract. Misery loves company and dirty linen. Some even bleach them in the sun with urine. You wrinkle your nose at the thought, but wonder if it works better than ash and sweat. The stream has swelled overnight, running faster and higher than usual. A rough stone slab has been dragged into place. Near the edge of the bank, a communal wash stone, stained dark from years of use. It's oddly satisfying. Someone behind you hums a tune, a low, repetitive melody with no words. It's one of the old washing songs. Dip, scrub, slap, twist, dip again. The music of laundry. A few younger girls have gathered on the other side of the stream. Did you hear? One says that the Reeves daughter paid coin to have her washing done for her. Another scoffs, coin. For washing, she says she's got hands too soft for soap. That earns a round of laughter. You glance at your own hands, wrinkled, raw, already red from the stream. Hours pass. In the rhythm of labor, the rocks grow slick. Your knees ache. Someone breaks out a length of twisted soaput, a rare treat. Eventually, the rain eases, leaving only mist. You wring out the last tunic with aching fingers and stand, knees stiff. Drying is its own challenge. Inside the cottage, you string twine across the rafters, hanging the clean garments like ghostly shapes above the hearth. You remember stories told by the older women how in the big towns, laundresses boil clothes in great cauldrons, then stamp them underfoot in tubs. Outside, the clouds shift. Later, you sit with Agnes and Maud near the embers of your shared fire pit. We should build a permanent wash house, Maud says suddenly. With a roof. You raise an eyebrow. And how would we pay for that? She shrugs. With good sense. Agnes chuckles. Still, the idea sticks in your mind. A place where women's labor isn't hidden behind hedges or crouched in mud. That night, you dream of stones stacked high and steam rising in clouds. You wake before dawn, hands curled into fists, nails still holding the shape of soaked cloth. Laundry day will come again soon, but the song remains, and the stones will wait for you, like they always do. You resorting through a basket of linens when you find a stain that one tea come out. It's not the usual mud or food or soot. This one is older, deeper, a brownish smear across the hem of a smock. Long dried and set into the fibers like a memory. You rub it with your thumb. Maybe blood, maybe dye. The fabric is coarse, already worn thin. It's not just about cleaning anymore. It's about preservation. This particular smock belonged to your oldest son, now grown and gone to apprentice with a smith the villages away. You hadn't seen the garment in months. It came back in a trade bundle, likely used to wrap up a jar of tallow or a small loaf. The threads are pulling. It may only survive one more washing. The ground has dried, and the air smells of soil and birch sap. It's spring again, and the fields are greening. A good day for laundry. Returned not out of sentiment, but out of need. Nothing is wasted here. Not even old shirts. But you watches, and you teach. You run your hand along the frayed edge. How the knowledge is passed, not with parchment and ink, but with shared labor, wet hands, and the quiet of a running stream. And that's where the quiet, invisible battle begins. Not against the dirt itself, but against time, the darkening at the knees of a child. S. Britches tells you whether they play in mud or kneel to pray. The wear at the elbow of your husband S. Tunic tells you he leans on the work table more often than he admits. The next wash day is warmer. Her mother is ill, and her older sister is helping with the lambing, so the washing has fallen to her. Dried, pressed flat between stitches. Not a weed, but a flower, a blue one from the upper field. Where she walks, to clear her thoughts. She didn't thank you, but she looked relieved. You said nothing. You just washed around it carefully and placed it back where she'd left it. The sharp odor curls into your nose, mixing with the smell of damp cloth. Your fingers ache. A burn from last week is still healing. The skin puckered, slightly shiny. This time, you're not alone at the stream. Restored. Order reclaimed from the chaos of daily living. A young girl named Ellsworth, barely 12, walks nervously at your side, clutching a bundle of shirts in a tin pail. If it's too stubborn, let it soak longer. She fumbles with the soap, nearly drops the bucket once, but keeps going. She doesn't complain. You smell the fresh air on it, the lye, the smoke from the hot. Who taught you that soap is a luxury, and water is a burden, and clean fabric is worth more than gold on a feast day? She doesn't yet know the trickster ratio of ash to water, the way to fold a hem over your palm for better scrubbing, how to angle the cloth against the rock so the fibers don't tear. They'll lift it to the light, see the stain, and feel the texture of the cloth. They'll wonder who wore it, who washed it, what the mark meant. You hand her a square of oat cake, still warm from your pocket. Ellsworth hums to herself while pinning up a small shirt with wooden pegs. Rub the collar like this, you say, demonstrating with the heel of your hand. Ellsworth nods, eyes wide, lips pressed in concentration. By the time the last shirt is clean, her cheeks are flushed with effort, and her arms shake from the work. You did well, you say. Her face brightens, and you can see it how these moments become part of someone. There's something intimate about washing someone else's clothes. You learn things, small things. The way a shirt phrase tells you if someone favors their right hand. Sometimes there are secrets in the folds. You once found a wilted flower tucked into the pocket of your daughter's overdress. Another time, you found a letter in Agnes's laundry smudged ink, never sent. You handed it back without reading. The laundry sees everything and speaks nothing. Today, you're boiling lye in a copper pot, a rare loan from the Reeves' wife. You think about the women who came before you, the ones who scraped their hands raw before you were born. You wonder if they ever thought their knowledge was important, or if they just thought it was survival. By afternoon, your drying yard is full. Tunics sway like banners. Sheets snap in the breeze. You stand back and admire the sight, not because the clothes are beautiful, they're plain, patched, faded, but because they are clean. It's not just laundry, it's a return to form. Later, while folding the dried smock from your son, you pause again at the stain. It hasn't come out, not entirely. A shadow still clings to the fabric, soft at the edges, like a bruise under skin. But the smock is clean. You fold it slowly. Not everything needs to be perfect. Some things need only to be cared for. And perhaps someday, someone will find this garment in a chest, and they won't know your name, but they'll know you were here, that someone stood by a stream, scrubbing away at the stubborn things that cling to life, that someone sang old songs and passed down knowledge with wrinkled hands and red knuckles, that someone kept the fabric of daily life together, one bucket at a time. The rooster crows long before the sun rises. Though you were already awake, the thatched roof above your head does little to hold in the warmth of the dying hearth, and the wool blanket covering you is rough and scratchy despite being scrubbed just 3 days ago. You rub your face, still sore from sleep, and know exactly what day it is. Laundry day. You groan, not out loud. Of course, it is a full-body endeavor, a laborious ritual that will occupy the better part of your day if not longer. And it begins, as it always does, with collecting water, still better than it will be by noon. There's no point, but the feeling is real. No one enjoys laundry day in your village. It is not a task of leisure or even a simple household chore. It's called lye water, and it stings if it gets in your eyes. But it cuts through grease better than anything else. And that's what matters when you're working with sweat-stiff tunics and soot-stained aprons, worn linen, thin in places, with fraying cuffs and armpits that have seen too many summers. You push them down with both hands, squeezing and kneading like dough. Your fingers go numb from the cold. You rub cloth against cloth, using friction to scrub out dirt. You flip, twist, rinse, repeat. There is no soap. Soap is expensive, and your family rarely affords it. Instead, you use something far more. Humble wood ash. You pour the water in slowly, adding the lye, stirring it with a stick until it turns cloudy. Then you begin. The stream lies nearly half a mile down the dirt path, past the barley field and the goose yard. Just before the woods begin, you grab your bucket, worn smooth by years of use, and step outside into the still blue morning. Your forearms are raw. You move on to the heavier garments, wool over tunics, a child's cloak stained with berry juice, and a pair of socks stiff with dried mud. Each one demands its own battle. A light frost coats the grass, your breath clouds in front of you. One of them, Agnes, nods at you without looking up. You don't have those today. Just lie and be patient. She's busy stirring something in a clay bowline. There is a smell of damp moss and smoke in the air. Someone else has already lit their fire. You're not the first to the stream. 3 other women are already there. Sleeves rolled, buckets full, and hands red from cold. Cold year-round, even in summer. You dip your bucket in and let the weight of the water sink it. Your arms strain as you haul it back out, sloshing and heavy. It takes 3 more trips to fill what you need. Water's moving slow this morning, she says. You set your bucket down beside hers. The stream is narrow here, but steady. Then comes the walk back slow, careful, balancing the slopping buckets with aching fingers. It's all just the beginning. Back at your cottage, you set the water beside the fire pit and begin preparing the wash. A scoop of white ash from last night's fire, carefully sifted and mixed with hot water, creates your cleaning solution. The washing basin is a shallow wooden tub, patched in 3 places. The shirts go in first. It's not glamorous. It's not fast, but it works. Mostly, by mid-morning, steam rises from the pot of rinse water boiling over the hearth, and your back aches from bending. Occasionally, someone might add herbs or flowers to the water lavender, if they're lucky, or mint. Outside, the wind is picked up. It's time to hang the clothes to dry. The drying yard is just a patch of ground behind the cottage, strung with twine between 2 old posts. You pin the garments with wooden pegs carved from spare kindling. Longer if the clouds return. The wind snaps them like flags. The linen flaps wildly. A tunic sleeve slaps you in the face, and you mutter a word you shouldn't. It will take hours to dry. You look down at your hands, red, cracked, and slightly burned from the lye. Shared suffering is the closest thing to joy on laundry day. You flex them slowly. This is why you only wash clothes every 8 or 9 days. The labor is too great, the toll too steep. You think of the baker's daughter, who once claimed her family had a copper basin and perfumed oils from town. But she's also the one who got lice last winter, so maybe fancy doesn't always mean clean. Later, you return to the stream not for washing, but to rinse the worst of the soot from your bucket. The sky is dull now, the sun hidden behind a veil of clouds. Agnes is still there, soaking a wool shawl. Sheep dung got into it, she mutters. Again, have you ever thought about the queen? How do her clothes get washed? You both laugh. But it's a tired kind of laughter. Agnes glances up. Whether they'll remember these buckets and cracked hands, these little battles fought with boiled water and ash. You shrugged. Probably someone else's hands. Probably not hers. Agnes grins. Still stinks the same though. Laundry day is done. You nod. Everything does. Eventually, you walk home in silence. By dusk, the clothes have dried. Mostly, a few damp patches linger in the thicker wool. You bring them inside anyway, folding them slowly, stacking them into rough piles on the wooden bench. And how many generations have passed that knowledge down without ever writing it down? The room smells cleaner now, faintly smoky, faintly like ash and wet fabric. You rub your hands with a bit of leftover grease to soothe the cracks, then sit by the fire with your legs outstretched. Your body hums with exhaustion, not the painful kind, but the kind that settles deep and slow. Outside, the wind whistles through the eaves, but as you stare at the fire, your mind wanders. Who was the first person to invent lye? To realize that something as useless as wood ash could clean cloth. You wonder how people in the future will wash their clothes. Will anyone ever care? Or will it all fade like steam into the sky? The next day begins with a correction. A clay tablet from last month has been returned from the archive with a stylus mark scratched through the king's seal. Someone, likely a higher scribe or a temple accountant, has noticed an inconsistency in the herd count. From the eastern pastures, you'd recorded 1,200 for sheep, but a new note insists there were only 1,191 missing. The original tally was confirmed by 2 shepherds, both of whom signed with their thumbprints. The tablets were marked, stacked, dried, and stored. The process was clear. The numbers weren't made up. He squints at the column of wedge marks, tracing each numeral with the edge of his fingernail. On clay, 3rd in sheep, you run your finger along the inscription, rereading it carefully, but still, the error stands. You call over Nabushu, the elder scribe with a habit of mumbling to himself. Could have been a duplicated entry, he says. Or the sheep were miscounted at dusk. Happens when they're restless. Then why wasn't it caught before sealing? You ask. Because no one notices mistakes until after the seal dries. He shrugs. You sigh and begin scraping the surface of the clay to revise the numbers. It's tedious. And when the number of sheep does not match the tablet wins. Delicate. One bad scrape and the whole thing will crack. This is what it means to work in an empire. Errors aren't accidents, they're punishable. Numbers are sacred. The sheep are real, but the numbers are smoother, easier, more obedient. The scent of oil lamps and ink fills the room, thick and heady. Your hands are stained with dust and ash. The tablets must match the previous month's sacrificial counts exactly. Any deviation is cause for review. You can't herd animals on a tablet, but you can shape them to look good. Then another, names of delivery teams, time of transport, receiving temple official, even the route is recorded. Instead, you make the official notation 10 losses due to illness and heat. You leave the rest unsaid. Later that morning, a shepherd arrives in person. You've never seen a time like that. He's dusty, sweat-stained, and clearly agitated. They're grazing farther out now, he says, pacing before your desk. The fields by the river are crowded, but we're only allowed to report 10. Too many herds. Not enough space. They fight there. Uneven, smudged, brittle at the edges. 16 districts. Hundreds of entries. Most of them delayed. Some duplicated. Many completely missing. But in a world where people believe order keeps the gods happy, repetition is sacred. Real shepherds crouch in the grass, squinting into the twilight. You haven't seen a live one in weeks. But here they are, whole herds, grazing in neat rows of cuneiform, sealed and stored in baskets. They get lost. The sign for a district, the symbol for transfer complete. Pretending helps. Clay tablets are stacked floor to ceiling, each resting in straw-lined jars. You walk among them like a ghost, fingertips trailing along centuries of bureaucracy. The market stalls are shuttered. The wedge marks are shallow and worn, but still readable. Only the faint sound of temple drums echoes down the alleyway. It's the only way to keep the dust from sinking into your soul. You nod, making notes on a clean slab of clay. How many deaths this month? That's why they want it pretty. You didn't think about the shepherd, who told the truth and was asked to write less of it. 17. He replies, without hesitation. You stop writing. Who gave that instruction? The man hesitates. The supervisor at the corral. You don't press further. Everyone here plays the same game. By midday, the office is hotter than usual. The clay dries faster, and your stylus sticks. Balanced totals. No gaps. Just enough truth to keep the whole thing standing. You're compiling transport orders, now lists of sheep to be delivered to temple kitchens for upcoming festivals. It's not about the sheep anymore. It's about consistency. You draft one tablet. The irony isn't lost on you. A journey of 3 miles, lasting half a day, takes longer to write than to walk. Nabushu groans beside you. I miss the days when counting meant fingers. Or stones. You glance at him. No, he chuckles. But I like to pretend. You smile faintly and return to your work. That evening, the overseer brings a new assignment. Retabulate the annual livestock census for the outer... They want it ready in 3 days, he says, for review by the palace clerks. You stare at the stack of partially baked tablets. This is half the data, you say. They know, he replies. You know what that means? Smooth columns. You work late. The city outside has quieted. You press your stylus into the clay with measured patience. The word for sheep again. You lose count of how many times you write the same sequence. Each tablet feels like a repetition of the last. Somewhere out there, real sheep wander. Before you leave for the night, you visit the archives. It's a cool, dark room carved into the wall of the administrative wing. You find a tablet older than your father, dated by its king's seal. The same signs, the same sheep. You place your hand on the cool clay and wonder, how many generations have counted the same animals under different names? How many scribes sat where you sit, worrying over the same mismatched totals? And in the end, did any of it change the way the sheep lived or died? You return to your quarters with clay under your nails and ink in your cuffs. You eat alone, a barley cake, some onion. You think about the tablet with a missing sheep. You think about how paper sheep don't run, don't bite, don't die in the heat. And yet, somehow, they're harder to manage than the real ones. Morning comes quietly, as it always does in the inner district. The sky is pale with heat, even before the sun clears the temple rooftops. A few early traders move carts of vegetables and salted fish through narrow streets, but most of the city is still stirring. The census tablets are waiting. You've slept little. Dreams of cracked clay and scribbled symbols kept pulling you back into your work. You return to the scribe house with heavy steps. Today you will finish them, and sacrificed over the last 12 moons across every district of the lower kingdom. It's the keystone. The numbers here must not only be accurate, they must please. Not because it will fix anything in the herds, but because that's what you do finish. One wrong numeral, and you'll be the one questioned, not the herders who lied, not the traders who skimmed, just a scribe who wrote it down. Not because anyone will thank you. The tablet you're working on now is the summary. The total sheep counted, transported, lost, traded. You added an extra 50 head to the temple district. You pressed the stylus harder than you should, etching each line slowly, carefully, with a perfectionism that feels equal parts pride and fear. The overseer lingers nearby, not breathing down your neck exactly, but standing just close enough to remind you this tablet is destined for the royal clerks. Nabushu leans over at one point, squinting. You nod. Yes, it's what they wanted. He smirks. The gods are getting fat this year. It's carved into a larger slab, one that will be displayed in the entry hall of a shrine. The clay is pale, smooth, and a clean face for a dirty year. You glance up at him. Better them than us. You both go back to work. Just enough that your first wedge comes out crooked. By midday, the summary is done. 2 losses and taxes. Not supplication, but they'll see your hand in it, whether they realize it or not. You place the completed tablet on the drying rack positioned near the open archway, so the sun will harden it quickly. The overseer nods. Good. The palace courier leaves tomorrow, and just like that, you'll work your careful scratches and the sweat on your back. The mental math at midnight is reduced to a bundle and a reed basket. One of thousands. You walk in silence, past the barley fields and the quiet grazing lands, to the place where the city ends and the country begins. The afternoon brings a rare break from livestock. You retasked with assisting a temple official in preparing a ceremonial inscription and offering record to the goddess. Birds skim the surface. A boy throws stones at the water. The wars, maybe a god or two, but not the men who counted sheep. We list their names, their weights, and their fates, but I doubt they even know we exist. A shepherd waves from a distance, his goats clustered like dust motes on the hill. As you begin, you notice something odd. Your hands tremble, just slightly. But even empires crumble, and what remains? Broken pottery, dust, bones. The idea feels absurd. You only meant to count. But then again, isn't that the magic? And, if they're lucky, your tablets, new sheep, waiting, silent, complete, new scribes. The cycle will continue. You breathe deeply and begin again. Will they read your numbers and wonder who you were? It's been years since you carved anything that mattered to the gods. You're used to lists, not prayers, but you work slowly, deliberately, imagining the thousands of feet that will pass by this slab in the coming years. They won't know who carved it, and something about that feels peaceful. That evening, Nabushu invites you to walk the riverbank with him. You rarely leave the walls, but today you agree. You crouch down and brush a few pieces into your palm. One edge still holds a mark. The sign for lamb, under 6 months. There. The river reflects the fading gold of the sky. Funny, Nabushu says, kicking at a rock. We count their sheep every season. You nod. They think the temple keeps the records. He smirks. We are the temple. You sit beside him on the worn grass. The wind rustles the reeds. Somewhere in the distance, drums sound faintly from the city. They'll forget us, he says. After a long pause, they'll remember the kings. You smile slightly. Unless our tablets last, he chuckled. Then they'll remember the ship and nothing else. You return to your quarters and light a single lamp. The floor is littered with fragments, discarded clay, broken reeds, and shards of past tablets. You stare at it for a moment. How long do these marks truly last? The empire is vast. Will someone dig them up in 1,000 years? A foreigner, a scholar, a child. Will they think you were important? You laugh under your breath. You never meant to be remembered. But clay remembers when people don't. You place the broken fragment back on your shelf, beside your drying stylus. Tomorrow, the herds will be tallied again, and somewhere, buried deep in a jar, your tablet will sit. Not a poem, not a prophecy, just a count. And innately enough, there is comfort. You wake to the sound of coughing deep, wet, and far too close. It's coming from the other side of the thin wall that separates your bed from Mrs. Ellaby's. Her cough always starts around 6. You could practically set your pocket watch by a tiff. You had one, that is, by 7. The house will begin to stir. By 8, the porridge will be burnt. And by 9, Mr. Dalton will slam the front door because he's late for the warehouse again. The wallpaper once had flowers, but time and soot have faded them into smudges. A single window lets in the pale London daylight. More often, fog thick enough to press against the glass like wet wool. Instead, you lie there beneath the scratchy wool blanket, staring at the water stain on the ceiling and counting the seconds between each rasping hack. Everything creaks in this house. The stairs, the doors, the windows. It's an old building, once elegant, now simply lived. In such is life in a Victorian boarding house. Your room is one of 7. It's barely wide enough for a narrow bed, a chipped wash basin, and a wooden chair that wobbled. He doesn't respond. He is reading the paper and grumbling about the cost of meat and new regulations at the dock. She's one of the night workers out late, up later. No one asks questions. She pays rent on time, tips Mrs. Pennington a few extra coins, and minds her own business. That's enough to be left alone, like potatoes in the same sack close, but not mingling. He rents the front room because he claims the sunlight improves his mood. No one has ever seen him in a good one. The landlady, Mrs. Pennington, insists coal is too dear for hallway warmth, so the fire in the front parlor remains untouched most mornings. If you're late, you'll find your door locked with your coat and boots in the hallway. She doesn't shout. She doesn't need to. The silence of eviction is far more cutting. The porridge is cold, thick, uninspired. Yesterday, you overheard Miss Thistle muttering to herself about a client who refused to pay for a hat. All alike in stature, tall, narrow, with flaking paint, and windows that reflect more sky than sun. Mr. Dalton's boots are drying by the hearth, despite the fire being cold. And upstairs, someone plays a tune on a harmonica slow, wavering, unsure. Someone spilled ink on the ledger. Someone else tracked mud into the back room. This one tastes faintly of turnips and strongly of regret. Still, you eat. You all do. The table is shared by necessity, not by choice. But for 10 minutes each night, you are a reluctant family. You lie beneath the blanket, fully clothed, hands tucked under your arms for warmth. One of them has a dog that barks from the 3rd floor landing. You quicken your pace. You do part-time clerking, sorting letters, sealing envelopes, and fetching tea for the supervisor when he's feeling noble. It's not much, but it pays your rent. Barely. The day before, Mr. Dalton's snores shook the rafters, and the night before that, someone wept softly behind the 2nd floor stairwell. Ellaby, perhaps, or the new girl, and stared at the same damp corner of the wall. Hard to tell. They all sound the same at night. It might have been the new light. No one's sure of her name yet. That'll be Miss Thistle, the seamstress, heading to her corner table in the drawing room. She does piecework for a milliner down on Fleet Street. Hats and veils mostly. She keeps to herself, except when she's short on thread or stories. You learned long ago to dress fast shirt, vest trousers before the chill soaks through. You sit up, rubbing your arms. The room is cold. Always it. Down the hall, you hear the clatter of boots and an apron that seems to collect every flavor of stain the house produces. She knows everything. Who paid rent late? Who's taken in a guest? Who cried quietly in their room on Wednesday night? She doesn't mention it, but she knows. You step into the corridor, creaking floorboards, announcing you like a stage cue. The breakfast table downstairs is a patchwork of mugs, chipped plates, and one communal pot of tea that's been steeping since yesterday. Mrs. Pennington serves it with a grim efficiency. She's a small woman with thinning hair tied in a bun, spectacles permanently perched halfway down her nose. You spoon porridge into your mouth and nod politely at Mr. Dalton across the table. Beside you, the empty seat belongs to Rose. Conversations in the house are never really private. The walls are too thin. That's the way it is here. You live together, and yet apart. You finish your breakfast and rinse your dish in the basin. The water's gray. The towel, grayer still. Upstairs, your neighbor's cough has subsided. For now, work today takes you to the post office on Gray's Inn Road. Mrs. Pennington expects her coin by Monday afternoon. You pass 3 other boarding houses on the walk to the post. The day moves slowly. You seal letters until your wrist aches. Count stamps until the numbers blur. The supervisor complains about new rates from Edinburgh. By the time you return home, dusk has crept in behind you. Evening in the house has its own rhythm. Rose is back, sipping tea by the window. Miss Thistle is bent over her hatwork, lit by a flickering candle. Dinner is stew. Oh, a stew. Then it's over. Plates clatter. Chairs scrape. Doors creak. And the house retreats into its own rooms again. Your room is colder now. The fog presses hard against the pane. Above you, footsteps cross the floorboards. Misses you close your eyes, listening to the breathing of the house, the groans, the sighs, the occasional shiver through the beams. It isn't comfortable. It isn't luxurious, but it is, for now, yours. As you drift toward sleep, you wonder, what stories do these walls hold? How many tenants came before you ate porridge at this same table, counted pennies under this same ceiling? And will anyone remember that you once lived here at all? The following morning begins not with a cough, but with a crash. A teacup based on the sharpness of the shatter somewhere on the first floor, likely dropped by Rose, who isn't known for early rising or careful elbows. You hear Mrs. Pennington's voice through the floorboards, calm/clipped, already scolding without raising her tone. He has the front page of the Gazette in one hand and a crust of yesterday's bread in the other. Neither appears to bring him peace. Her fingers move quickly, with the speed of someone who's done the same motion 1,000 times. You wonder if she ever actually finishes anything, or just keeps making endlessly. You roll over, pressing your face into the blanket, and wonder if the broken teacup will show up on the rent ledger. It might. Everything does eventually. Downstairs, the house is already alive in its disjointed way. Mr. Dalton is ranting again. Something about his pay being short, or the railway opening a new route that bypasses his dock entirely. Miss Thistle sits by the window, sewing a ribbon into what appears to be a morning veil. You pour a cup of tea. It's bitter, nearly cold, and only slightly less awful than the porridge, which has crusted around the rim of the pot like plaster. Rose arrives last. She's barefoot, with smudged eyeliner from the night before, and a confidence that no one dares question. Her dress is clean, somehow nicer than the rest of you manage. The new tenant moved into the attic room 2 days ago, carried in by a cousin and a sack full of books. Her dress is plain, but clean. Her hair is tightly braided, and her eyes go wide when she sees you. She hasn't come to breakfast. She hasn't made tea, and she hasn't introduced herself. She grabs a teacup, doesn't apologize for the one she broke, and raises an eyebrow at the room. Does anyone know who the new girl is? Everyone goes still. By the time you arrive at the post office, your sleeves are damp and your hands smell of coal. There's always a new girl, eventually. Boarding houses are like lungs, always breathing people in and out. You agree, not because you want to, but because the overtime will pay for the leaky boot you've been meaning to replace. No, Dalton slamming doors. Even the staircase seems to creak more cautiously. Invoices. She says nothing, but her expression suggests she's carrying a secret. Mrs. Ellaby sits hunched, a shawl wrapped around her neck 3 times. Her cough is worse every breath, sounds like gravel in a sack. You avoid eye contact. A bundle of Christmas cards has been delayed since February. She's quiet, Miss Thistle says without looking up. Too quiet, mutters Mr. Dalton, folding his paper. She writes, Rose adds, as if this is a crime. You sip your tea. I heard her crying last night, says Miss Thistle softly. After a pause, no one answers. You see the new girl later that morning in the stairwell. She's hunched over, arms full of papers, trying to balance a quill and an inkwell without spilling either. You offer a nod. She hesitates, then nods back. That's all. In the boarding house. That's enough. Too much friendliness invites too little suspicion. A nod is neutral territory. The air in London hangs low with soot today. It clings to your coat, your teeth, your lungs. The work is unchanging. Your supervisor asks if you'd be willing to stay late. You return home after dark, exhausted, only to find the boarding house oddly quiet. No harmonica music. At dinner, only 3 seats are filled. Miss Thistle eats with one hand, while continuing her stitching with the other. Rose appears eventually, sliding into a chair with dramatic flair. You wait for her to speak. She doesn't. Not yet. It's not until later, when you're pouring water into the kettle, that she corners you near the stove. She's writing letters. Rose whispers. You blink. Ooh, the attic girl. That's her business. I saw her dozens of them. She's not mailing them either. She's keeping them, like drafts, or a diary. Some are sent, some are kept. Most are neither read nor remembered. Still, you say nothing, or married. Which is worse? You shrugged. She writes them to someone named Edmund. Over and over, same name. You glance toward the ceiling. People write letters all the time. Rose lowers her voice. I think he's dead. About the one you wrote after your father died, folded neatly and tucked in the back of your coat until the rain made the ink run. About how many words are buried in the walls of this place, never spoken aloud. The room falls silent, not rudely, just curiously. You raise your eyebrow. She smirks. Later that night, as you lie awake, you hear the floor above you groan. Footsteps, pacing, a soft creak as a chair is pulled out. Then, the gentle scratch of pen on paper. You stare at the ceiling. You think about the letter you never sent to your sister. Maybe you understand the new girl more than you thought. On Sunday morning, the unexpected happens. The new girl comes down for tea. She wears a simple gray dress, and her shoes are polished, but her hands tremble as she pours her cup. Mrs. Pennington offers her a seat beside Miss Thistle, who surprisingly makes room without complaint. The new girl says, her name is Evelyn. She doesn't explain where she's from. She doesn't talk about Edmund. She just asks if anyone has sugar. Someone passes her the bowl. The conversation resumes, and the house breathes her in. That afternoon, you find a note under your door. Not a letter, just a scrap of paper, folded once. Do the walls hear? Always listen. You reread it twice, then tuck it into the back of your ledger. No answer seems necessary. After all, everyone here is already writing something. It just depends on who's brave enough to put it on paper. Monday arrives with fog so thick it pushes under doors and seeps into every corner of the house. The wallpaper curls slightly at the edges. Your boots are still damp from yesterday. The tea tastes mostly of hot water. Rose is absent. Mr. Dalton chews toast in tense silence, and Miss Thistle is already dressed, gloved, and frowning at the seam in her sleeve like it personally offended her. Mrs. Pennington leaves a note on your door that simply reads, Ren do. You watch as she tucks it into her coat before sitting. No one mentions it. Not directly. I've found work in Dover. No greeting. No signature. But it's expected. Downstairs. The porridge is unusually thin, stretched to feed everyone. Evelyn arrives last. She's holding a letter. The envelope is pressed flat, sealed neatly in red wax, but glances pass around the table like smuggled goods. When she finally speaks, her voice is soft but clear. I'll be leaving in 2 days. Mrs. Pennington gives a small, almost imperceptible nod, as if she'd already known. Miss Thistle murmurs something about sea air being good for the lungs. Mr. Dalton just grunts. You stare at your tea. 2 days. People come and go all the time. It's how these houses breathe, after all. But Evelyn had only just begun to settle in. She's wrapped in a shawl, hair down, letter still in her hand. To speak, to exist in the rhythm of the place. Now, like all the others before her, she vanished. No, I think it's for me this time. Another ghost in a house that forgets slowly. That evening, after the others have gone to their rooms, you find Evelyn sitting on the front steps, but only when you speak softly. She doesn't look up when you sit beside her. I wrote to him every night, she says, as if you'd asked. Sheets folded. A single hairpin was left on the nightstand. Mrs. Pennington says nothing, but you notice she lingers near the attic stairs longer than usual. You say nothing. Sometimes I rewrote the same letter 4 times, changed a single word, a comma. Sometimes I didn't send them. Most of the time, I couldn't afford the postage. Dover. The fog curls around your ankles. A cart rattles distantly through the street. I'm not sure he ever read the ones I did send, she adds, but I needed to write them anyway. You nod slowly. Then, after a pause, will you send that one? How steady her hands had become, and how, despite everything, she had left when so many others hadn't. Good houses like this don't keep dreams, just steam and stain. She looks down at the envelope. Upstairs, You take out the scrap she left you last week. Just your room number written in careful script. Do the walls here. Always listen. You write your answer on the back. Yes. You leave it outside her door. Tuesday morning. Evelyn is gone. The new girl in room 3 though. When she thinks no one is listening, Mr. Dalton finally fixed a loose leg on his chair. Miss Thistle sold a bridal veil to a woman who didn't want to be married. Her room is clean. You check the hall table. No letters. No forwarding address. Just an empty teacup in the sink and a chair pushed in neatly beneath it. That night, Rose returns. She's wearing a new dress and smelling faintly of lilacs and who usually leans toward sharp edges. She pours tea, stirs it slowly, then asks, "No one in particular. Did the writer leave?" Place it beside her original note. Miss Thistle nods. Rose blows on her tea. No one disagrees, but you think about Evelyn's envelope. How careful the seal was. You return to work, counting stamps and sealing notices for overdue coal payments. The days blur. Rain comes, stays, and leaves again. The house holds steady. Mrs. Ellaby's cough is worse now. Life, such as it is, goes on. A week after Evelyn's departure, a small envelope arrives for you. No return name. Inside, 1 page. Right back. Even if only to yourself. That's where most of it starts. Anyway, you fold it carefully. You sharpen your pencil, and that night, for the first time in years, you begin a letter with no intention of sending it. It starts, "To whomever finds this beneath the floorboard, or behind the dresser, or in the crack of the stair." You smile. You don't need a reply. You just need to remember that someone once asked a question in this house, and someone else answered, softly. The sun rises slowly over the rooftops of Boston, slipping between chimney pots and illuminating the thin film of soot on your shop's front window. You've been awake for over an hour already, the wig-making bench weights, strewn with ivory combs, tin pins, sheep's wool. The day has begun in a shallow bowl of thick, perfumed pomade that clings stubbornly to the rim. Judges, governors, barristersmen, who shout in courtrooms or give speeches in taverns. They all need wigs, and wigs need to be cleaned, styled, powdered, stitched, and trimmed. It is tedious work, smelly work, and sometimes dangerous work, but it is steady. You stretch your back and adjust your apron. The best hair comes from Europe, shipped in rough crates and smelling faintly of seawater and mildew. You are Perugia, a maker of wigs. You are not a wealthy man. Though your clients are, you drape it over the cedar rack and begin working the paste in with a stiff brush. The pomade is a mix of pig fat, scented oils, and a bit of wax. The powder clings, fluffing up the curls. It will fall out gradually through the day and into the wig wearer's collar. But that's not your concern. He's 12, thin as a fence post, and usually late. Today, he's early bribed you, suspect, by the promise of delivering a new wig to the courthouse. Your job is the illusion of cleanliness and status. It goes rancid if left too long. You try not to breathe through your nose, says it drags in the wind. And in a city like this, full of pride and powder, steady means survival. Said he'd pay double. If it's done by noon, that's the 3rd time he's changed his mind this month. Your shop is small, nestled between a cooper's yard and a haberdasher. Then hand me the shears. Inside, it smells of tallow, vinegar, beeswax, and faintly, always, of old sweat and flour. And formal, the Ramillies, with a braided queue, and the bob wig, short and practical for the more modest gentleman. You dust them each morning, carefully brushing away the powder that settled overnight. Your back aches, the wig bench is unforgiving, and the constant reaching, combing, stitching, and tying wear on the spine. A street preacher shouts about modesty. 2 dogs bark in unison near the bakery. Your fingers are already blistered from this week's curling. Rats sometimes sneak in to nibble the horsehair. You've learned to set traps under the shelves. Hargrave, a solicitor with a face like damp bread and a wig like a powdered thundercloud. Always needed in a hurry. never thanked when delivered. The display busts stand by the window, each holding a different style. The Brigadier, stiff snip, trim, pinch, roll, fix, dust. The rhythm is almost soothing. You repowder it lightly, careful not to let the starch clump. The Constable favors, lavender overpowering, but popular among city men who fear sweat more than fire. Behind the curtain lies your workshop deem, and lined with shelves of coiled hair. Human, horse, goat, and sheep. The worst comes from local barbers and tavern drunks who trade a lock of hair for coin. Tom has returned with payment from the constable, only half what was promised. You begin with cleaning. A judge's full-bottomed wig was returned last night, soaked with sweat and something that might be gravy. Next, you powder. A rat skeleton under the bench. You dispose of it quickly. You fill your bellows with finely ground starch, sometimes mixed with chalk or crushed lavender, and pump it carefully over the freshly pomaded wig. At mid-morning, the apprentice arrives. His name is Tom. He rushes in. Hair tousled, cheeks pink. The curls are flat, the side rolls uneven. It smells faintly of pipe smoke and onions. "Master Nathan," he says breathlessly. The constable's man came by. He says he wants his cue shortened. You sigh. Tom grins. You nod. The cue wig is easy work. Tom packages the wig in its cloth-lined case and hurries out, the bell clinking as the shop door swings shut. You take the opportunity to sit. You sip water from a cracked mug and listen to the street noise. Horse hooves clatter by. Just another day. Around noon, a client arrives, mister. He removes it dramatically, setting it on the counter as if handing over a wounded pet. It needs attention. He says it wilted during a deposition. You inspect it. I could have it refreshed by morning. You say, I'll need it this evening. He replies. You say nothing, just nod. That's how this trade works. The process begins again. You set Hargrave's wig on the block. Warm a bit of wax between your fingers and begin reshaping the curls. Sometimes you imagine you're sculpting something, Nobelon artist of hair, shaping identity. Other times you remember you just wrestling a dead animal's fur into place for a man who Elo spilled gravy on it. By nightfall, by late afternoon, the workshop smells like powder, sweat, and faint rosewater. You finished Hargrave's wig. It's resting now. A bit too stiff, but passable. He says the braid was crooked. Tom mumbles. You nod. Of course it was. As the light fades, you begin sweeping. Hair, powder, old thread. Your fingers ache. Your lungs itch from powder. But the busts are ready for tomorrow, and the wigs are all on their stands brim, curled and powdered. You sit by the fire, eating bread and cheese with your knees pulled to your chest. Tom snores lightly in the corner. You glance at your hands, perpetually coated in a thin film of grease and dust. There's something ridiculous and solemn about this craft. Every morning, you revive scraps of hair. Every night, you watch them fall apart again. But people still come. They still pay. They still need their wigs, even if they never ask your name. As you doze off in your chair, a thought drifts in like powder. What will the world look like when men stop wearing wigs? And will anyone remember the ones who made them? The morning begins with a knock. 3 sharp raps against your shop door, just as you're pulling on your waistcoat. Outside, the city is still. Stirring chimneys, breathing smoke, carts rolling across cobblestone, and a distant bell of a church tolling the hour. You crack the door open to find a young servant, eyes wide with nerves. He's clutching a cloth bundle under one arm and a crumpled note in the other. He says, it's urgent. A speech this evening. Town hall. From Mr. Elbridge, he stammers. You take the bundle. It's a full wig. One of your older pieces, by the feel of it flattened curls, frayed lace at the nape, and a scent that suggests he has been sweating through every sentence he has ever uttered in it. Urgent, of course. They're always urgent. You read the note restyle at once. We'll collect by midday. A few strands of goat hair have begun to yellow a sure sign. He has been storing it in a drawer instead of letting it breathe. Double payment, if satisfactory. You comb, reshape, re-wax, and finally, repowder this time with orris root, a finer, more floral powder that adds just enough scent to mask the old sweat without overpowering, which you accomplish by reducing the side roll volume and adding a modest wave at the temples. Half, if not more. No pride, like men who've given up the fight, but the Ramillies tipped over. Its cues cracked. You sigh and set the wig on the bench. The wig is in worse shape than it seemed. The back is matted. The powder is clumped, like wet flour. Height shape, stiff lace front, subtle gray mixed with brown. She wants presence, not youth. You work quickly. First, brushing out the worst of the clumps, then gently steaming the stiffened curls, using a kettle you keep for this very purpose. You're halfway through when Tom stumbles in bleary-eyed and yawning. "Did you polish the busts yesterday?" You ask without looking up. "I did," he says. You close your eyes for a moment. Glue it. Hide the seam. If it's still crooked by tomorrow, we'll say it was dropped in transport. Tom nods and vanishes behind the curtain. By mid-morning, 3 clients have come and gone. The baker's apprentice picked up his master's Sunday wig this small. Tight one he wears to church, shaped like a loaf of braided bread. A traveling lecturer came in to demand his periwig be made less French and more parliamentary. Then, a surprise visit from Mrs. Boothan, older widow, with a keen eye for fashion and an unapologetically loud voice. "Wigs look sad these days," she declares as she walks the room. You nod politely as she inspects the busts, like a general surveying her troops. "I want something tall," she says suddenly. "Something that says independent, that says wealthy, even if I'm not." You write it down. She exits in a flourish of perfume and opinions. "You'll need to begin that one tonight." At noon, Mr. Elbridge himself arrives. He's tall, waxy, with a nose like a sundial, and the breath of a man who chews cloves to disguise whiskey. He inspects the newly restored wig with both hands, tugging the curls as though checking a horse's legs. "H.E.M., he grunts. "Tidy weight." He turns it, squints, and sniffs, then nods once. "Double payment," he says, tossing a small pouch on the table. It clinks copper and silver. "The people won't trust a man with a limp wig. See that it stays like this," he mutters as he exits. You make a note to powder his next piece, extra stiff, whether he asks for it or not. After he leaves, you finally eat cold bread and boiled onion from your coat pocket, washed down with yesterday's tea. A chimney sweep trudges past, blackened from boots to hat. A woman in green sells apples from a cart, her wig barely hanging on a limp. Mousy thing pulled too far back on her scalp. You sit in the doorway, watching the street bustle. Across the lane, a group of boys are chasing each other with sticks. You think, not for the first time, about advertising. Something simple, a sign with painted curls. Refinement starts at the crown. Or maybe the man is known by his hair. You scold him not angrily, just enough to make the lesson stick. Then you show him how to repair the damage, trimming back the burned ends, fluffing the layers, and repinning the cue so the bare spot is hidden. But signs cost coin, and ink fades, so you return inside and pick up your comb instead. You braid the side panels, sew in horsehair 4 volume, and begin building upward. The merchant's son came in to ask for something just like General Washington-esque. You gave him a stock brigadier style and added a curl. He'll never know the difference. Later, Tom burns the edge of a powdered wig while trying to dry it too close to the hearth. The singed smell fills the shop. How many names you've written in a ledger. How many faces you've never seen beneath your work. "Never powder near flame," you say. "I thought it would dry faster," he replies. "It will also explode." He nods solemnly. You suspect he won't make that mistake again. By dusk, your fingers are cramping. You've stitched 6 lace fronts, powdered 9 wigs, and shaped 3 entirely from scratch. Tom has gone home. You light the lamp, pour another cup of lukewarm tea, and begin Mrs. Booth's towering confection, still hair to curl, still proud to pin into place. You don't rush. This one will take the better part of the night. Around midnight, you pause to rest your hands. The shop is quiet. The street outside is dark, save for the occasional echo of footsteps or the rattle of a carriage. You touch the pile of trimmed hairs at your feet and wonder where it all goes. How many hours you've shaped into curls. You stare at your reflection in the darkened window. Your own hair is thinning. You haven't worn a wig in years. No need. No time. The irony isn't lost on you. You return to the bench. There's still powder to sift, because no matter what they say, people are their wigs, and you're the one who makes them. Morning creeps in slowly, with gray light bleeding across the floorboards and into the folds of Mrs. Booth's towering wig, still unfinished, but proud even in its half-assembled state. The pomade is hardened in delicate coils, and the side curls hold their place like tiny sentinels waiting for further orders. Just a short nap in the corner chair, arms crossed, head bowed. Outside, the city wakes one clatter at a time. Hooves, carts, voices, the life of Boston resuming its endless, stubborn rhythm. Your neck is stiff, and your hands are raw. But the wig, it's a masterpiece in progress. You barely slept. You stretch, light the fire, and warm a bit of coffee in a tin pot blackened from years of soot. Tom arrives later than usual, cheeks flushed with embarrassment. One is angled too far back, giving the powdered curls the look of a startled possum. He wears no wig, just his natural hair, tied back and powdered slightly at the temples. A few years ago, this would have been scandalous. Now, it's becoming common. I overslept, he mutters, dropping his satchel. They say the courts might lift the wig requirement. What do you make of that? You nod, then get to work quicker. He busies himself, dusting the shelves and rearranging the display wigs, though he always forgets to position them properly on the busts. You correct it without comment. Fashion shifting. One last time, he says, after this, I don't think I'll be wearing it again. Natural hairs, the new Republican ideal. It was a fine piece. Once likely imported. European goat hair with a subtle brown undertone and delicate lace, carefully stitched at the nape. The kind of wig that once demanded a man stand straighter just by wearing it. Mid-morning brings a different kind of visitor. A tall man, well-dressed but slightly disheveled, enters a shop with a parcel under his arm. Some claim wigs are signs of tyranny, powdered relics of a system that no longer suits the colonies. When people stop buying them, we'll stop making them. Until then, we keep combing. You scrape the old powder, re-wax the curls, and gently press a damp cloth along the lace. He sets the parcel down gently and speaks with a slow New England drawl. You stare at him. No introductions. No orders. Just that. It won't happen quickly, you reply. But yes, I've heard the same. He nods, eyes scanning the rows of busts. They say wigs are going out. The curls puff out from the base with fresh symmetry, and the lace has been mended with care. You place it back in its case, with a strange sense of finality. You don't argue. You've read the pamphlets, heard the sermons, the whispers about English vanity, monarchical. He unwraps his parcel. Inside, a full-bottomed ceremonial wig, finely crafted but matted from neglect. The lace is torn. I need it restored. You nod silently and take the wig from him. He leaves without giving his name. It will hold for at least 2 weeks, longer if you sleep upright. You set the wig on the bench and examine it closely. You begin the cleaning slow, methodical, familiar. There's something mournful in the motion, not just for the wig but for the world it represented. Tom asks, are we going to stop making them if people stop wearing them? You pause, then shrugged. He nods thoughtfully. Then, what happens to all the old wigs? They start as hair and string, but soon, you know them like faces. You glance toward the shelf, where 24 sit proudly atop, their wooden busts curled, powdered, smiling in silence. They gather dust. You say, he's quiet after that. By afternoon, The ceremonial wig is complete. It looks almost regal again. You wonder if it'll ever be worn again. Mrs. Booth returns as promised. Just a few strands fall to your comb each morning. Her arrival is unmistakable perfume, parasol, and a bonnet adorned with an entire bird's worth of feathers. You present the towering wig on a velvet-draped bust. She gasps not dramatically, but with genuine pleasure. It looks exactly like Lady Delacroix's, she says, squinting at the side curls. But taller. Better. You smile. I always do, she says. You place it carefully into her padded box, along with powdered sachets, to help preserve the scent. She pays double. Reward for elegance, she declares, before sweeping out with enough flair to rattle the shop door behind her. That evening, Tom helps you reorganize the shelf. You pass over the ceremonial wig, the last wig of its kind. Perhaps they place it among the others. Center left. I don't want to forget that one, you said. Tom nods and labels it with a small tag. Elocution wig retired. You both chuckle. It's strange. You realize how personal wigs have become. The curl that leans right, the side roll that never cooperates, the powder scent each man prefers. They carry personality, habits, reputations. Even after the heads have moved on, later, when the fire is burned low and Tom has gone home, you sit alone at the workbench. Your own hair is thinning now. You run your fingers along the row of wigs so many hours, pressed into pomade and thread, so many anonymous lives made a bit more important, or at least neater, by your hands. You wonder when the wigs are finally gone, when powdered heads give way to natural ones will. Anyone remember the men who curled, stitched, and powdered the pride of a generation? Will someone dig up a wig bust from a cellar, run their fingers through the stiff lacework, and wonder what it meant to a courtroom full of powdered heads? Or will it all fade like the starch in a summer rain? You blow out the candle, leaving the room in silence. Only the dust remains, drifting slowly through the air, and the wigs dozing quietly on their shelves, waiting for one morning. You awake in a small clay brick house just off the Agora in Athens, around the 4th century BCE. The sun has yet to crest the Acropolis, but already the street outside buzzes with sandals on stone and shouts of vendors setting up for the day. Your wife is tending the hearth fire. Your youngest child has taken the last of the stale barley bread. The only thing on your mind, where to relieve yourself. Welcome to the glamorous world of ancient Greek sanitation. You dress quickly, chiton, sandals, and a wrap for your shoulders. Not because you're in a hurry, but because you've learned that if you daunty, make it to the public latrine before the potters and wine cellars, or at least that's how the city elders describe it, you'll be standing in line next to a man with questionable aim and garlic breath. Others, like you, head for the communal facilities. The polite thing to do. There is no bathroom in your home. Few homes have them. Certainly none in your neighborhood. Just you, your neighbors, and the lingering odor of 100 morning routines. The wealthier homes on the hill sometimes have chamber pots tucked into back rooms or a private outhouse in the courtyard. But here, among the working folk, you do your business outdoors or not at all. Instead, the responsibility rotates among wealthier citizens appointed to civic roles. If a man falls into disgrace, the gossip often begins in the latrine about how the waste pit overflowed under his watch, or how someone caught dysentery after using his assigned facilities. Some use pots and empty them in the alleyways before dawn. It's a civic duty. You splash it on your arms, neck, and mouth, then wipe dry on your tunic. His back is hunched, his sandals worn to paper. He doesn't look up. The water smells faintly of algae, but it's cold and refreshing. The public latrine lies at the edge of the marketplace, tucked behind the herbalist's stall and the shop that sells cheap sandals. It's a long stone bench, cold in the morning, with oval cutouts spaced every few feet. Beneath it, a shallow trench carved into the ground carries waste to a collecting pit further downhill. Usually. Sometimes it backs up. Sometimes it doesn't flow at all. Backed everything up. There is no privacy. No partitions. He shrugs and goes back to scrubbing. You sit quickly and stare straight ahead, pretending the man next to you isn't humming. But beneath the chorus of daily commerce, you can still hear the latrine water trickling, gurgling its slow path beneath your feet. There is no paper. Of course, you brought a smooth shard of pottery, ostraconus, to scrape clean what must be scraped. Some use leaves, and had to wait behind a fishmonger and a boy holding 3 goats. Others use sea sponges on sticks, shared by all and rinsed in buckets of vinegar water. You don't think too hard about what they used yesterday. The latrine isn't maintained by the city. Not exactly. Athens prides itself on moderation. Cleanliness is civic honor. As the sun dips, casting golden rays across the red tiles of the Acropolis, you walk home, tired, dusty, and increasingly aware of your own bodily needs. Again, or at least that's the theory. In practice, it's mostly a matter of luck, rainwater, and how often someone brings a spade. You know they're talking about building another one, north of the funded by the Temple of Athena. After relieving yourself, you rinse your hands at the public fountain, a trickle of water coming from a carved lion's head. You pass an old man scrubbing the latrine floor with a bundle of reeds. Flooded again last night, he mutters. You nod. Temple boys keep dumping their chamber pots down the hill. He points to a drainage ditch, overflowing with cloudy runoff. You offer a sympathetic grunt. The agora is alive now. Figs are laid out in pyramids. Pottery glints in the sun. Someone shouts about discounted olives. You wonder how the city hasn't collapsed under the weight of its own waste. But then again, you've heard stories about Egypt how they bury their waste in Sandan stories about Rome, where men build entire aqueducts to carry water, just for bathing. You sigh. Moderation smells worse in the summer. At midday, your friend Diodorus joins you at the olive press. Latrine was full again. He grumbles. You nod, unsurprised. He leans in. Really? You say, that would ease the crowd, only if they can keep it from clogging. You both chuckle. The rest of the day passes in chores, bartering, arguing with a tax collector over grain levies, and trying to sell your neighbor a cracked amphora. Back home, your wife whispers that the alley has already been used twice by the boys next door. You nod and decide to wait for the morning. She hands you a jar of vinegar water to rinse your hands, and you silently vow to bring to a struggle tomorrow, just in case. You lie down on the mat and stare at the beams above. So many things shape a civilization. Philosophy, theater, democracy, and yet, every day starts and ends with a man, a bench, and a problem no one wants to talk about. The gods may watch from Mount Olympus, but they never had to share a latrine with a fishmonger and 3 goats. By morning, the stink from the alley behind your house is unbearable. The night must have brought more than shadow someone. Emptied a full pot behind your storage shed, and the flies have gathered for their morning symposium. Your wife is already muttering under her breath, waving a reed fan at the window, and a city still trying to solve the problem of where to put human waste. You tie a scrap of cloth around your face and head out, carrying a broom and a bucket of ash. This is life in Athens. Cradle of philosophy, home of democracy, keeps the insects away, and gives your neighbors the impression that you're at least trying to be a good citizen. Maybe Hestia can bless the broom. Maybe Hermes can carry the smell away. He was nearly fined once, public nuisance. They called it but his cousin's a councilman. So nothing happened. Ash is the trick. You learned that years ago. Sprinkling cold ashes from the hearth over surprises left in the alleys makes the smell fade quicker. The man 2 houses down, Megacles, never bothers. His alley reeks. Everyone talks about it at the baths. You know, half of them mostly tradesmen. A few clerks. One retired soldier who always clears his throat before sitting. There's a system here. Unwritten but understood. No cutting, no lingering, no eye contact. And a man in sandals, too, fine for his surroundings. Trying not to step in a runoff channel that smells of old wine, and worse. You scrub and sprinkle. Then leave the alley to the gods. Word is, they want to connect the latrine trench to the aqueduct runoff. Let the waste flow into the ravine near the Temple Hill. You'll walk to the Agora Passus, The usual array of inconveniences. A puddle that never dries. 3 boys arguing over who should fetch water. You make it to the latrine by the olive stalls. We'll all be philosophers before the council gets it right. The crowd is already gathering. 6 men and a boy wait in a crooked line. You strike up a conversation with Io-san, a potter with arms like tree trunks, and a booming laugh, and the steady trickle of wastewater that may or may not be moving depending on the slope that day. Have you heard about the city drainage plans? He asks, glancing at the bench with narrowed eyes. Another plan, he nods. You'd like to tell them that virtue begins with latrine etiquette, but you hold your tongue. Your old ones are too sharp now. The corners chipped from use. The mason lays out a few, triangular, round-edged, one with a fish etched faintly on the surface. You raise your brow. Won't that pollute the water? He shrugs. Not our water. The fish pond downstream. You both pause. That explains the smell of the last mullet I bought, you mutter. Maybe they thought it would be a kind of offering. He laughs, slapping your back. A priestess from the temple of Demeter is there, holding a cloth to her mouth. A crier stands in the square, unrolling a scroll. Some scoff. Who's going to enforce it? The baker's boy. Your youngest son runs past, barefoot, and trailing a strip of linen. He's laughing, which means he hasn't yet discovered that the chamber pot under the stairs is full again. Others nod approvingly. For your wife, you pour, cover, and tamp it down with your heel. A final sprinkle of ash, a small flat stone over the spot. Inside the latrine, the usual complaints resume. Anyone caught dumping waste into the main street shall pay a fine of 5 drachmas and clean the affected area with their own hands. One man mutters about sponge sticks not being clean. This spot has seen many small pits, and now it's due for another. Will anyone remember what it was like to live in a city before soup? The soil is soft, dark, and faintly rich, with composted waste, a reminder that even unpleasant things return to the earth. Another grumbles that someone stole his favorite stone scraper, a smooth piece of marble he'd left on the sill. From the courtyard, you can smell roasted onions and garlic drifting through the neighborhood. There is still no privacy, of course, just a long stone bench, the occasional hiss of someone rinsing. You do your business and move on. There's no lingering in places like this, not because of shame, but because the smell sticks to your clothes the longer you stay. Back in the marketplace, a group of youths from the academy are arguing about whether true virtue can exist in politics. Instead, you visit the stonemason's stall. To buy a new set of ostraka, you choose 3. He raises an eyebrow, expecting a long walk. No, you reply. Just planning. He chuckles and adds a 4th for free. You stop by the fountain house to refill your jug. Someone fouled the upper steps again, she says, barely concealing her disgust. Left their pot by the statue. You nod sympathetically. She shoots you a glare. You carry your water home in silence. At midday, the council announces new sanitation measures. From the city magistrate, all chamber pots must be emptied before the 2nd hour of daylight. A wave of murmurs ripples through the crowd. One man laughs out loud. Still, the law is now official. You make a mental note to rise earlier, just in case. Back at home, you sit in the shade, watching a goat chew on a discarded sandal. You sigh and stand. It's time to dig. You take the family spade and walk behind the fig tree in the garden. You dig slowly, a shallow hole, wide enough for a bucket's worth. Done. The sun sets behind the hills, turning the sky gold and orange. You wash your hands in vinegar water and sit at the table, nodding as your wife hands you a bowl of lentil stew. No one speaks of toilets at dinner, but after the meal, as you lie back and listen to the frogs begin their night chorus in the ditches, you can't help but wonder, for all our talk of democracy, of philosophy, of glory, before flushes, before walls, will they imagine the Athens of gods, or the one of overflowing pots and trench diggers? And will they ever believe that a man once kept his honor intact? By remembering to bring his sponge, the morning begins, as it often does, with a debate. You are seated outside the local tavern. sipping watered wine and eating an olive off the tip of your finger, when two men at the neighboring table launch into an argument, not about war or politics or gods. No, about toilets, indoor privacy, one insists, are a mark of debt, and they wash their drains clean with running water. Running from inside the house. You've heard this debate before. You've lived it. The Romans are building them, says the other, mouthful of bread. It reads. You lean back in your chair. A familiar stench wafts up from the runoff ditch that curves along its base. Someone's been emptying night jars. There again, it seeps into the soil and trickles slowly toward the street. The truth is, no one really wants to talk about waste, but everyone thinks about it, especially when there's nowhere to go. Later, while walking toward the pottery quarter, you pass the slope behind the amphitheater. You notice a sign posted hastily on a wooden stake. You are not here to bathe. Though your wife has hinted it would be wise but to take a look at the new latrine. Foul dumping here is punishable by fine and divine two wooden buckets with water, no visible sponge sticks, which is either encouraging or worrisome. You snort. No god you know spends their time watching ditch and finds only work on people who have something to lose. One of them tosses a clay shard into the ditch. A splash follows. The other howls with delight. He nods. You nod. Only half a mile. By my guess, a pair of boys runs past you. Laughing, watch it. You shout. They scatter. Apparently, she dumps a household waste out the front window after dusk, hoping no one notices. You detour past the temple of Hephaestus and arrive at the public baths. It's rumored to be the cleanest in the city. You step inside. Smooth stone walls. 4 benches. A central drain running beneath them. And miracle of miracles, a place doesn't smell terrible. You sit. You breathe. You think. Strangely, it's peaceful here. No one bothers you. No one rushes you. Just a faint dripping of water, the rustle of sandals in the courtyard, and a quiet awareness that the city's waste is slowly, blessedly, flowing away from you. A man enters and sits 2 spaces away. We're a long way from chamber pots and alleys, he says, sighing. You tilt your head. He chuckles. You know, Socrates once said, he who cannot manage his bowels should not seek to manage the city. It's people learning, day by day, how to live close together without losing their minds or their dignity. You raise an eyebrow. Did he really say that? I don't know. The man shrugs. But he should have. Outside, the agora is bustling. You pass a group of women drawing water and overhear them discussing a neighbor's bad habits. A neighbor choosing not to dump out her window. They've noticed one of them sighs. She ought to be exiled or married off to a Spartan. The others laugh. You keep walking. Back home, your youngest son is digging in the garden. He looks up as you pass. I made a pit, father, he calls. Like you showed me. You peer over the fence. He has indeed dug a hole. It's shallow, wide, and filled with an impressive number of fig leaves. Excellent, you say. But remember, it's not for figs. He giggles and goes back to work. You feel strangely proud. That evening, while sitting on the roof with a clay cup of wine in hand, you think about what the city leaves behind. Most people imagine Athens as marble and scrolls and orators in togas. But the real Athens, their drainage, its chamber pots in alleys. It's a man remembering to bring his own. A child learning when and where to dig. These aren't the things that fill statues or stories, but they matter. They shape the city just as much as law, architecture, and theater. Perhaps more. As the stars rise above the rooftops and a breeze carries away the smells of the day, you whisper something no one will write down. We are not defined by our gods, but by how we clean up after ourselves. And for a moment, it feels like wisdom. You wake before dawn. As always, the room is still dark, save for the faintest gray light pressing in through the shutter slats. It smells of smoke and tallow thick and cloying, the way it always does in the candlemaker's loft. You hear the dull clink of iron tools and a groan of the big copper pot as it is set over the fire. The wax must be warmed slowly, stirred just right, or it scorches. And scorched wax sells badly, smells worse, too. Your hands already carry the scent, even after scrubbing them last night with lye and cold rainwater. You dream of heat often now, not fire or sunlight heat itself. Blistering and dense, the kind that clings to the walls and skin, the kind that stays with you long after you've left the workshop. It's dim, lit only by the orange flicker of the fire, which reflects in the great copper pot like a dancing ghost. The room smells like old fat and beeswax and soot. In the corners, smoke curls lazily toward the rafters. Downstairs, the master is already stoking the hearth. You sit up, fingers aching from yesterday's work. This is your life now. You are the candle maker's apprentice. You dress quickly, wool shirt, leather apron, sleeves rolled high, and descend into the workroom. The master nods at you, but doesn't speak. He rarely does in the morning. You move to your post by the dipping rack, where dozens of wicks hang, thin and ready. You'll dip them today, over and over, until they're thick enough to sell. The process is simple, but it takes hours. The tallow is rendered from sheep fat, boiled for hours, strained through muslin, and left to cool. When fresh, it pours smoothly. When old, it thickens too soon and sticks to the wick in clumps. Each must hang just so, or the candle will lean. A leaning candle is worthless. The wax this morning is a mix, mostly tallow, with a small scoop of beeswax added for softness. The first coat is like paint, thin and almost invisible. You lift it out, let the wax drip, then hang the rack on its peg. Too cool. You check the pot. Too cool. Still. You stir. By the 10th dip, your fingers are sticky, your sleeves stiff. By the 20th, your feet ache. Somewhere nearby, someone is shouting about turn. But in here, the world is all wax and heat and fire. The long iron paddle creaks against the rim. You steal a moment to stretch your back and flex your fingers. You wait, and while you wait, you prepare the wixcot to size, twisted tight, dipped in a primer of wax to stiffen them. The master finally speaks. The master didn't shout. He just made you clean the pot with cold water while your hands throb. You haven't made that mistake since. He prefers tallow mold short, thick candles for taverns and kitchens. He says they burn too fast for churches. You're not allowed to handle the molds yet. That's senior work. You're still learning to keep the wax from blistering. Not too fast with the first dip. Light coat first. Let it dry. You nod. Some bend at the top. Some taper too much at the base. The kind of heat that softens tallow just enough to ruin hours of labor. He's said it 100 times. But you say nothing. Inside, the monks are quiet. Voices hushed, even in greeting. You lay the candles on a wooden table near the altar and wait as the brother in charge inspects them. This is the rhythm of apprenticeship. Repetition, patience, blisters, and silence. The dipping begins. You lower the rack slowly into the pot, holding the frame steady. Then again and again. Each time, the wick grows a little fatter, the column of wax a little smoother, and still more dipping. You watch carefully as he stirs, noting the small motions. When to lift the paddle, how to watch for bubbles. Outside, the town is waking. You hear a bell in the square and the distant creak of cartwheels. The master is pouring molds now. A customer knocks on the door and the master goes to speak with her. They're red again. Raw where the wax splashed was too hot. You hide the worst burns with a rag. All part of the quiet machinery that keeps the town lit. Last week, you dropped an entire rack into the vat and ruined it. By midday, the dipping rack is full. You place the finished candles on the shelf, neat rows of off-white rods, each one slightly different despite your efforts. You try not to look disappointed, the master does. He scans the rack with a stony eye. Better, he said. Then he hands you a cloth bag and gestures toward the abbey down the road. They need 6 pounds by Take the straight ones, and don't let them melt. You nod and pack the candles carefully in straw. It's hot today. The abbey sits on a hill. Its stone walls, white against the sky. He doesn't smile, but he doesn't frown either. This one leans, he says, setting it aside. Wind warped it while cooling. You offer, too quickly. He raises an eyebrow. You bow your head, still. He counts out coin silver pennies in a waxed pouch. You tuck it into your apron and leave. Back at the shop, the master is melting beeswax in a smaller pot. Festival order, he says. Pure wax church use. No tallow. You nod. Beeswax is rare, expensive, golden and fragrant. It melts slower, smells sweeter, but it's fickle harder to cool, easy to scorch. Someday you'll work the beeswax, he says. You smile, surprised. That's the closest thing to praise you've heard in weeks. Evening comes. The shop cools. The shelves fill with candles, some fat, some slender, some dipped, some poured, all made by hand. People think candle making is simple, just fat and fire. But it's more than that. It's patience, timing, heat, humility, and most of all, it's pain. Pain in the fingers, in the back, in the knowledge that your work is invisible until it burns. You eat by the fire, tearing bread into small pieces and dipping it in garlic oil. Your hands still smell like wax. Your sleeves are stiff with tallow. Outside, the first stars are appearing. A single candle flickers on the table. One of yours, a little crooked, but steady. The next day begins with bees, wax, and silence. You arrive before the sun again, slipping into the shop while the air is still cool. And the coals on the hearth are only embers. The master has already lit the small lamp near the beeswax vat. His way of saying the day's first work is not for tallow, not for taverns, not for quick burns. Beeswax is delicate, expensive, and sacred. It is the candle of clergy, funerals, weddings, anything where souls hang heavy in the air. It burns cleaner, slower, longer. It holds shape like marble, smells like honey, and doesn't smoke black across stone chapel walls. You're still not allowed to pour it. But today, you're allowed to cut and weigh. Imported, mostly. Some from local hives when they're willing to part with them. You use a heated knife to slice thin ribbons, careful not to waste the edges. Every scrap must be melted, every drip counted. The master hovers nearby, watching your hands like a hawk. The wax comes in rough bricks, the color of old gold. Too thick, he says. You adjust. The scent that rises is warm and sweet, so different from the greasy stench of tallow. Too thin. You adjust again. Finally, a grunt of approval. Bright, simple, pale rods, meant to guide the deceased into whatever light lies beyond, but not show it. The pieces go into the smaller kettle, where they're stirred slowly, gently, until they become a shimmering liquid the color of sunlit amber. For a moment, the whole shop smells like a meadow. A priest arrives, mid-morning wrapped in his gray robe, sandals powdered with road dust. They're not part of the candle. Not technically, but the clients always notice them, especially in funerals. You see your reflection. Flushed cheeks, wax-licked hair, eyes a little red from smoke. Everything has to be clean, pure, controlled. The funeral procession leaves after the second bell. He says, "We'll need tall ones." He places a pouch on the counter. You count the coins. Enough for a dozen slender candles, what the priest calls soul tapers. It's barely heavy, but you carry it like it's filled with something sacred. You and the master begin immediately. The pouring process is slower than dipping. Each mold must be warmed first. Each wick is fixed with precision. Too tight, and it warps the wax. Too loose, and it collapses. You work beside the master in silence, your hands ready to pass tools, snip wicks, smooth the tops with a damp knife. You don't attend, but from the shop's back doorway, you watch the procession. For men carrying the bier, women in veils walking behind. No sobs, just silence. Heavy, respectful. Once poured, the candles must cool. in the back room of space, darker and cooler than the rest, where candles rest upright in neat rows like silent watchers. You open the window just a crack, let the breeze pass through, and then you wait while the candles cool. The master has you polish the brass holders. Your hands are red again. The smell returns. You dip the cloth in vinegar, rub it in small circles. The brass gleams faintly. You've started to look like a candle yourself. At midday, the master tests the first candle. He holds it near the hearth, shielding the flame from the breeze. It lights instantly, burns bright and steady without flicker. He nods. You pack the candles in straw, wrap them in linen, and load them carefully into the wooden crate. But your hands are full of wax again, and your nose still carries the sweet trace of bees. The funeral takes place just beyond the chapel. You imagine your candles held in trembling hands, wax dripping slowly onto the cold stones of the floor, guiding someone from this world to the next. Your wax, your wick, your fire. That afternoon, the tallow pot was boiling again. Back to tavern candles. Short ones, thick ones, fast sellers. The glamour fades quickly. You dip rack after rack. The feast, the prayer, the final breath. By evening, your arms ache. But the day isn't over. A woman appears just as you're cleaning up. She wears a shawl, mud on a hem, and a serious look. "My sister is to be married by week's end," she says. "We need light for the feast." The master steps forward. "How many?" She hesitates. "As many as 10 silver will buy." He nods. "That's 50. Tallow, with beeswax caps." You scribble the order. He folds the coins into his pouch, and the day stretches onward. You eat late, by the fire, too tired to chew properly. The bread is stale. The stew is thin. You stare at the candle burning in the corner. Short, functional, a bit crooked. One of yours, and not meant for marriage, or morning just enough to let you see your spoon. And that's enough. You lie down, and as sleep creeps in, you think, no one remembers the candle. They remember the wedding. But the candle, it burns, and it disappears. Its only legacy, a bit of melted wax on the floor, a trace of smoke in the rafters, and maybe if you've done your job well, light enough to see someone through it all.
It's raining! Not the kind of storm that drums the rooftops or floods the alleys, just a quiet, steady drizzle. The kind that makes soot run down walls and dampens everything with a gray sadness. The fire burns low, and the master has wrapped a cloth around his neck. You can see the stiffness in his movements, the way he leans more heavily on the table when pouring molds. His age shows more in winter. Inside the workshop, it smells more like earth and wax today. But the work doesn't stop. Not to test you, he simply trusted you to do it right. You've been given the beeswax alone. The wax must stay just warm enough. The pour just slow enough. You measure by feel now not time. And when the room begins to smell like honey and smoke and hot iron, it feels right. He watched you prep the molds, slice the golden bricks, and check the wick tension. Then, without a word, he stepped back. That's how you know you're no longer just the apprentice. Not entirely. Anyway, you move with careful rhythm, keeping your pace steady. The shop is quiet. No orders this morning. No visitors yet. The wedding candles from yesterday's rush have all been racked and stacked. The bride's sister had returned with a ribbon and asked if you might tie them with it. She said it would bring luck. You did it carefully, even though the wax was still warm. Sometimes small things matter more than the light itself. As the candles cool, you take a moment to clean the dipping rods. They're old-pitted, blackened with years of talabut. They're part of the shop's soul now. He's wet from the rain and smells faintly of wood. The same rods the master used when he was an apprentice, maybe even longer ago. You run a cloth along one of them, tracing the tiny initials carved into the handle. A.E. You don't know who they were. Just another hand in a long chain of hands. It makes you think how many candles have been made in this place. How many were burned at births, weddings, and death? How many left no trace at all? The door creaks open near midday. A young man, wrapped in a patched cloak, steps inside. "I need a candle," he says. You glance toward the shelf. "We have many." "What kind?" He hesitates. "Not for light," he says quietly. "For memory, you know." He chooses a small beeswax taper plane, but perfect. You wrap it in linen and hand it over. He pays with 2 copper coins. "Who was it for?" You ask softly. He looks down. "My brother." You place it on the windowsill, where its glow can be seen from the street. You say nothing. Just watch as he leaves. Outside, the rain keeps falling. Later, as the shop quiets again, the master speaks from his bench. "Do you know why beeswax burns longer than tallow?" You shake your head. "The room is warm. Your hands ache, and your clothes smell like wax and smoke. Because bees don't rush. They pack each cell with care. They take their time." He turns the candle in his hand slowly. Good wax is patient. It holds what we give it and gives back slowly. You nod, unsure what to say. He adds, "Tallow's for the living. Beeswax is for the soul." As night falls, you light one of your own candles short, hand-dipped and clean. It's not for sale, not for ceremony, just a flame to remind the night that someone is still awake, still working. You think about the candles that burned beside a dying bread, or lit a bride's trembling fingers, or gave a poor family enough light to share a story. That something, somewhere, is still being made with care. You eat Ladigan barley bread, pickled onions, and a slice of goat cheese. You wouldn't trade it? Not anymore. Before bed, you check the back room. The candles you poured earlier are lined up in neat rows. Their surfaces smooth, their wicks trimmed. They're ready. Tomorrow, they'll be sold, burned, melted, forgotten. But tonight, they're yours. Perfect in their stillness. You lie down on the floor, Matt, hands folded behind your head, staring at the ceiling beams. Somewhere in the dark, a candle flickered. You think about the hands before yours callous burn. Careful, it's a small thing, making candles, but small things burn longest. And sometimes, they're the only thing standing between someone and the dark.